In Alan Greenspan's memoir, The Age of Turbulence, a 500 plus page Tom published the year before the financial crisis, the process, supreme mortgage, and predatory lending don't merit so much as a mention. Rembrandt's book is a triumphant account of his 18 and a half years as Fed chairman, years during which, by his account, he fought on economic crisis, kept inflation under control, and deeply manipulated interest rates to ensure that the economy hundred and team markets rose. Before the financial crisis tarnished his reputation, rampant self-image, Fed chairman as economic superman, was widely shared. Congressmen fell all over this bill except to praise him when he made his seminal appearance on Capitol Hill. His interest rate decision was invariably lauded. Many economists viewed him as the greatest Fed chairman ever, even greater than Paul Volcker, who had tamed the rising inflation of the 1970. The small handful of privileged journalists who had off the records access to rampant regurgitated his pronouncements as if they had been handed down by the Oracle of Delphi. To many people, Greenspan was the Oracle of Delphi. All throughout the country was understandably fixed on Greenback's handling of monetary policy. The Fed had always had other roles too. It had supervisory authority over the big bank holding companies. It was supposed to be the guardian of the safety and soundness of the banking system. It even had a division of consumer and community affairs to look after the interests of bank customers. The Fed, in other words, was a regulator, where banks, however, was not. As a young economist, Grandpants had come under the spell of Ayn Rand, the author of the Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, two of the most influential ode to capitalism ever written. The capitalism Rand believed it was full-power, unregulated, laissez-faire capitalism. As she once put it, the key that didn't put regulatory roadblocks in the way of red-blooded entrepreneurs. Grandparents meet ran in early, uh, the early 1950 become part of her inner circle and remained close to her until she died in, in 1982. Conservative economists like Grandpants in always going to tilt against regulation, but Rand gave his leaning a philosophically underpinning and helped turn him to a true free market absolutist. He come to believe that regulation always had unforeseen negative consequence and that the market itself was far better at embracing the good and driving out the bad at any well-meaning government mandate. That's what they meant by market discipline. Grandpa's anti-regulatory feasibility that did not prevent him from working for the government, however, has an advisor to Richard Nixon's presidential campaign in one 1968. He reasoned that it was better to advance free market capitalism from the inside rather than as a critical pam- pamphleteer. He says in the age of turbulence, in 1974, President Ford has a grand pass to become the chairman of the President's Council of Economic Advisors. I knew I would have to pledge to uphold not only the Constitution but also the laws of the land, many of which I thought were wrong. He concludes, compromise, when public uses, is the price of civilization, not an abrogation of principle. When he was nominated to be Fed chairman, Greenspan took his job knowing, knowing that he was an outlier in libertarian oppositions to most regulation. Therefore, he says his plan was to focus on monetary policy and let other Fed governors take the lead on regulatory matters. That's not really how it played out, however. Greenspan was too dominating a presence and his views were too well known. Fed economists who believe in the superiority of market discipline tended to do well in Greenspan's Fed to those who didn't languish it. There is no question, looking back, that Greenspan's Federal Reserve could have taken steps to curb the growing problems with subprime lending before they got worse. It had the authority. There was a law on the books called the Home Ownership and Equity Protection Act, or HOPEA, that gave the Federal Reserve the power to flatly prohibit mortgage lending practices that included were unfair or deceptive or designed to evade HOPE. The Federal Reserve has ample authority to encompass all types of mortgage loans within the scope of any regulations in promulgates. Rod Raymond Nader, a lawyer who had worked on the bill when he was on the staff of the Senate Banking Committee. There is also no question that the problems with subprime lending weren't a secret. After the crisis of the 2008, a common refrain arose that no one saw it coming, but that was never true. State attorneys general had filed lawsuits. Housing advocates had continually beaten the tombstones repeatedly, and it graphic detail. Congress and the regulators, including grandparents, had been told what was happening on the ground. Robert Ginesta, then the General Council of the Greenland Institute, which, among other things, advocates for consumer protections for people of diverse backgrounds, started meeting with the Fed chairman in the early in 1990 990s. He raised the problem of the many mortgage originators that existed outside the banking system and were unsupervised by any federal agency. We won't argue about whether federal regulators are doing a good job. NISA says he told Greenspan's let's look at the irregulated lenders. He had no objections other than saying he wouldn't know anything. Naisat says now. He was very gracious and polite, but there was also an imperious quality to him. A few years later, Eunice and Jones Gamboa, Greling's executive director, met with Grandpants again in advance of the meeting. Nalisa had sent the Fed pile of loan documents which Grandpants had read. Even if you had a doctorate in math, you wouldn't understand these instruments and their implications.